Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Soulkation podcast. I'm your host, Logan Renee, and I have the honor of introducing the fly, okay? The flyest, okay? Always on point, Miss KiKi Orr, our special guest. She is a speaker, blogger, coach, wedding officiant, and podcast host. She's a creator of a musical memoir entitled The Journey Love and Live to Love Again. She's a single mom of three daughters and a human resources professional in the financial technology industry. Welcome to the Soulkation podcast, KiKi.
Thank you so much, Logan. And hello, everybody. Well, that was a mouthful. That was a lot.
I mean, when you're famous,
Yeah.
you have to you have to read everything. You know what I'm saying? Let's start. So we were talking before the show, and you're from New York. How was it growing up in New York?
I mean, as a compared to what, right? Because that's the only place that I've ever lived and
That's
grown up. But I think New York in particular, because when people say New York, they're like, well, we're in New York, because New York is the state. We're like, I am New York City,
yeah.
born and raised, Harlem bred through and through. So it's phenomenal. Like I've seen what New York City was when I was growing up, crack epidemic, all of that stuff. And then moving into now the, what do you call that? The region, I was going to say, I'm losing my train of thought. What do you call
Gentrification?
Thank you, gentrification. That's it, gentrification.
Whatever.
That's what it is.
Whatever.
That is happening. I like to forget about it, but clearly gentrification is happening. So I love New York. I love New York City for its richness, for its culture, for its style, for its community. I love living in the city because I think for me, it definitely gives you an opportunity to build community. Like you really know your neighbors, you get to walk to places and all of that stuff and take mass transportation, all that fun stuff. So yeah, I love New York City. And I've raised my daughters in New York City, and a lot of people would be like, how would you raise children in New York City? But it makes them, they are well adjusted, they are street smart and savvy, they know how to navigate, right? So
yeah. Learning all type of skills.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what was the inspiration behind starting Just Bloom the podcast? And like, what does it mean to even bloom where you are? Let's do both questions.
Yeah. So I'll answer the question first by saying where I was, right, before I even recognized kind of the blooming process. I know you mentioned earlier in the reading of the bio that I was human resources professional. I was a human resources professional, right? Right now, I also do training and staff development. But when I was doing human resources in the financial tech industry, I had been doing it for 10 years in a startup company, and I gave like my blood, sweat, love, and tears to the job. And had that job after coming off of welfare, right? It wasn't my first job off of welfare. I had it a few years after coming off of being on welfare. And I was so elated to be able to have the job. And I was moving up the corporate ladder really well to the point where I got to having a six-figure income, and it was able to afford me and my family so many things: private school educations, trips, travel, even eventually bought a home. But that didn't, with my divorce and everything, that went by the wayside, but that's cool. And so in that process, what I realized is while it was providing things for us and for my family, I was so immersed in the things. Everything that I was and everything that I claimed to be was all about the accolades and the money associated with it. But I didn't really know self in that moment. And so I lost the job, right? I don't even say lost the job, because it's not like the job went anywhere. The job is still there. I got fired, essentially. I used to dress it up and be like, oh, I was laid off, but it was some stuff. And after 10 years, my services were no longer needed. And I think there's something important about me being able to say that and own that, because at first I was looking at it from a shameful place, like it was something that I did wrong. And I'm clear that that wasn't the case. So I can say it was the best gift that they've ever given to me. And so even after being fired, and that next transition for me, after first feeling shame and guilt and upset about it, because the thing became for me What am I going to tell my children, and how am I going to be able to provide for them, but provide for them in the way that I had been providing for them? Because I was like, oh, I can't tell them that they can't have this or they can't have that, because all that I was, again, was wrapped up in that job. And so after I lost it, I was like, well, let's press reset. And when I shared with my daughters at the time, they were like, okay, cool. But I then started to see, what is it that I wanted? What is it that brought me joy? What is it that I needed? And I realized that I hadn't been doing that. It wasn't until after losing the job. I actually traveled more after losing that job. I created the play after losing the job. I started dating myself. I started taking back, like, all of this really self-care and really getting to know me began. That began my blooming process after that, because I was no longer connected to the money and the accolades, because it wasn't there anymore. So I couldn't lean back on that. That all I had to look at that point was who I was. And so that's when Just Bloom became about, because I started to think about the things that I wanted to do. And I began to question whether or not I was too old to begin to do those, whether or not it was too late for me to be able to have the things that I wanted to have. And when I say have the things I wanted to have, I'm not even talking anymore about materialistic things. I'm just talking about a life filled with joy and creativity, because I love being creative. And will people look at me funny if I decided that I wanted to do a CD, a hip hop CD, because I love hip hop. Like, hip hop is my go-to. Like, don't ask me, because I see it's coming. Like, sometimes I spit a mean 16, but I ain't got nothing on my head right now. I'm thinking of like the 40-year-old version, VERSION, that's on Netflix right now. But I love like hip hop, and I began to explore that more, but thinking about how society creates, puts these things on us to say that this is where you should be at these particular junctures in your life. And if you're not there, then that's how they measure success or lack thereof. And so I was like, I'm sure there are other women who are in there. So I'm 48, and I was like, I'm sure there are other women who are either starting all over again or beginning their blooming journey that has these feelings of feeling like they should be much further along than where they are. And that's what I was experiencing. But I wanted to break through that. And so I started Just Bloom, the podcast, so I could remind us that whether we're in our first season or our 50th, it's never too late to just bloom. And I wanted to be the example for my daughters of what that looks like to start over, if you will, after a job loss or after a divorce or after whatever, ... You fill in the, the blank, so to speak. So that's how Just Bloom came about.
That's so good.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, you look phenomenal. Okay.
Thank you.
Like, phenomenal. Y'all make sure y'all watch this on YouTube, because y'all can see her. She's gorgeous.
Thank you.
I mean, 20. I would say 20.
Oh, come on now. Look at you making me blush. I do blush, y'all. I do blush. You see that color on my cheek?
How do you erase all that pressure and that stigma, especially for the listeners, when there is so much pressure? This is what you should have. This is what you should be doing. This is where you should be. All of those things that you always hear. And the holiday season is about to come up. So your family asking you all these questions. What would you say to them?
Right. So like you say, how do you erase the stigma? I say you don't erase it, right? You accept it.
Okay.
You acknowledge that that's what it is in the world, because to erase it would be to pretend that it doesn't exist. And if it doesn't exist, then we would never even be having this conversation to begin with, right? So I know that it exists and the stigma there, so I accept that that's what society thinks, but I don't own it, right? I don't carry it on for myself. And so, yeah, so for all those who's gone to family and family homes or friends' homes, or even, I'm gonna even just say, forget family and friends, because that conversation first starts with me, with you, right? And so it wasn't even family and friends for me. No one would probably even think twice about saying, oh, you should be here, you should be there. Like, no one has ever said that to me. It was what I was thinking for myself, but it's also what society has been demonstrating and showing us. It's so funny. My daughter, and I'll answer the question, but my daughter shared with me that she was watching The Bachelor. Yeah, I think it was The Bachelor.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, you guys should watch. The oldest castmate ever, or the oldest bachelor ever, was 39.
Yeah.
I'm like, so that's a big deal, because something in society seems to want to erase people when you get to a certain age. Like they don't even want to show us on television at a certain age or in magazines and all of that. I feel like we've gotten better. So I say first you have to have the conversation with yourself, right? The conversation of saying, do I believe that I should be here or there based upon my true beliefs or based upon that of someone else's?
Come on.
Because sometimes we set these goals and these things that is not really ours. We do it because it's like, well, society says by this age, I should have a child, and then I should have a home, and then I should have the picket fence, and then I should have this job, a 6-figure income. But if I'm living in an apartment and I have very little to no money in my bank account, and I am, taking mass transportation, then I am a loser. And it's like, but then you look around, you'd be like, but guess what? There's millions of others that are just like me. So are we all losers? No, like we are just where we are, and we've made choices in our lives, and those choices don't define who I am. I like to tell people, and this is what I tell you, I am not defined, and you should not be either, by your bank account. You should not be defined by your job. You should not be defined by the relationship that you don't have currently, right? So as long as that you are being honest and true to yourself, that's first and foremost. So the first question I ask is, who are you doing it for? Who are you living for? And then I think then you can go from there to the rest of it.
Who are you living for? Oh, that's so good. Ask yourself, who are you living for?
Who are you living for?
Okay.
Who are you making those choices and decisions for? And I'm a single parent, so sometimes a lot of my life had been, a lot of my decisions had been for that of my children, right? A lot of the things that I was doing was with my children at the forefront of them, and not that that was a bad thing. It was necessary for me in that particular moment, until I realized that I can't show them what it is to be what I like to call a warrior woman, right? If I am not standing in my strength, my power, my greatness, if I am not putting the oxygen mask on myself first, because then I start to be seen as a martyr, right? It's like, oh, the children this and the children that and the children this and I remember one day saying, and my daughter, so I have my oldest daughter is 28 years old, at 28, 25 or 26 now, and a 14-year-old. And I remember many years ago, someone asked something about why I didn't do X. And I was like, because the children, I have, my children, blah, blah, blah. My children are in earshot of me. And my oldest daughter said, so you didn't do that because of us? And that's not what I intended to say. Like, I was just like intended to be like, that was my responsibility at the time. But I realized how that message resonated, right? It starts to make it look like they're the reason why X or Y or Z did not occur. And where that's not the case, it didn't occur because I didn't have the desire, the courage, the bravery, the will to actually see it through. And it's easy, I'm not gonna say it's easy, but it can seem easier to be able to put it on something or someone else, right? The children, the time, the money, the this. But the question becomes, are you disciplined enough to be able to see those things? And when she asked me that, I felt terrible. I was like, I never want them to think it's because of them that I did not fulfill a passion of mine. And so that was a definitely shift for me in that moment.
Good. And I think for parents, like, it's a stigma, like you're supposed to know everything and always be right. And you can be wrong, and you can have a moment where you're like, you know what, I shouldn't have said that, or I apologize. Like, it's a lot of pressure to be perfect or to have the answer as a parent,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I can speak to that. So my, and I always talk about my children because I feel like my daughter, my 18-year-old, well, she was 18 then probably, but she said to my 28-year-old, she said to me, we grew up together, right? I was pregnant with her when I was 18, ultimately had her when I was, what was it, 19, and had her right before my 20th birthday. And she said, we grew up together. And so I didn't know it all, right? I had my children, and I tell them this too, they know this, right? For me, when I had my first daughter, it was really about being able to provide unconditional love to someone because I had come from challenging backgrounds. My mother didn't raise me for a lot of my younger life. My grandparents adopted me when I was 12 years old. I came to live with my grandparents when I was 12 years old. And then my mother didn't come back into my life and again until I was 18. And so I really felt like I wanted to be able to have a child, to be able to have somebody to love, because I didn't necessarily feel that love. I felt abandoned, and I was like abandoned. I had this story of abandonment and all of that. And I wanted something constant that I get to love, right? And so I didn't know anything, right? But I had my child. Well, the one thing that I did know is that I wanted to provide her love, and I would never like forsake her or leave her. That's what I came into parenthood with. That was all. Honey, I didn't even have, at the time, I don't even think I had a job, right? So it wasn't about knowing it all, but I learned along the way, and I grew, and I gave myself permission to not know it all and to make the mistakes, but always to acknowledge. My children will tell you to this day, I will always acknowledge something that I didn't know. If there's any way in which I have hurt them, intentional, unintentional, I apologize. I ask for forgiveness. If I am displacing in anger, I say, listen, I said that, but that's not, I was really angry about X, Y, or Z. So I have I like to say a really high emotional maturity, if you will, or emotional IQ. So yeah, we don't know it all. But the thing is that when you admit that you don't know it all, it gives you access to so much more.
That's so good. So I'm assuming this, and please correct me. Um, After the divorce, what made you decide, okay, I can't be in this anymore?
I can't be in this. When you say this, the marriage.
Be in a marriage anymore. Yes.
Um, well, I first want to say, because I want to just be really clear. I was a single parent of two prior to being married, right? So it wasn't like I was married young and was married from, I was a single parent of my two daughters first. And then I had the good grace of being able to find a partner where I could marry, because at that point, after having parented two children, I was like, I do not want to parent another and be by I just can't do that, right? I knew how challenging it is, rewarding in love, but I'm like, girl, we're not doing that no more. And so I was able to find a partner, and that he's the father of my 14-year-old daughter. And it was a loving and nurturing relationship. In fact, I shared with you at the start of the conversation that right now my mother is terminally ill with cancer. And so when she got out the hospital, we were watching home videos. And some of the home videos that we're watching, I have a home video where my ex-husband was in it, right? And there's a lot of, when you're married, you have videos and pictures and all of that stuff, right? And so we were all lovey-dovey and kissy, and I'm like, oh, sweet. And he's pumpkining me. And then I had to sit there for a moment. I was like, how does one go from all of that to because I'm going to get real, right? Like, to don't call me, don't text me. I could care less if I ever see you again, like all of that kind of rigmarole. And it's the dichotomy between the two. When I look back, it's like almost crazy to me, but it did. So to answer your question, what had me be like, I want out? It wasn't anything. There was no abuse. There was no adultery. There was none of that. I think it was just two people who, when we met, was good for each other at the time. And I am a person that's ever evolving and growing. And I just felt like I was growing faster than the marriage was growing.
Mm.
Like me personally, who I was, the way in which I was evolving, the way in which I viewed the world, the things in which I was doing, it started to be conflict there in that regards. I was also the breadwinner at the time in the marriage. And when I look at my part, never talking about his part, because I feel like we're all responsible for the roles that we play in relationships. And when I looked at my part, I realized then too is that I didn't really know how to be in relationship with that. So I was an independent woman. I earned my money. The way in which I moved sometimes very independently, right? I did things very independently and not necessarily always as a unit. There was a lot of times that I did, and there was a lot of times that I didn't. And I think that could be soul crushing to someone as well, right? So I think it was more so of just growing and not really knowing. And it just went left, and then we got divorced, honey. And it wasn't, so I wanted to fight for the marriage. But I only wanted to fight because I didn't want to look like a failure.
Mm.
I didn't really want to fight because I was like, oh, perhaps there's something. I just didn't want to look to the world as like I didn't succeed in this marriage and this life called marriage, or this marriage life. So, but when I really look back on it, and even now, hindsight being everything that it is, I don't have any regrets about it. I just know that I've learned a lot from having been married. I've learned a lot from now having been single for as long, for having been single as long as I have. But I also know that when I come into a new relationship, what I get to bring differently to it that I didn't bring to my marriage. But my ex-husband and I are in a better place that we've ever been before, for which I am grateful for. We have an amazing 14-year-old, beautiful, gorgeous, bright, intelligent daughter. And I am grateful for her that she gets to see us be in a healthy relationship. It's not like we talk all the time, but there's a mutual respect now that we didn't have post the separation, then followed by divorce. And that's the part that I did not like when I look back on things. I didn't like how that went in particular for her, but I'm grateful for the growth that she gets to see something different now. So,
Right.
yeah.
What advice would you give women that are co-parenting right now, and it's difficult for them, or there's no contact, or like what advice would you give someone that's co-parenting? Because I'm sure that's
Well, who's not
another.
co-parent?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say make it not be about you.
Mm.
If it were not about you, then who would it be about? It would be about that child. Now, I understand that there are certain circumstances and situations where that might not be the best thing to do, right? And I'm talking if a person is abusive, particularly I'm not even gonna say to you, but like to the child, because the reason I say I'm not gonna say to you, because I feel like there could be arrangements that could be set up where you are not necessarily involved, right? So I think it's important to make sure that it's not about you, that the focus becomes that of the child. And when it becomes that of the child, then I think that you begin to think about things differently. So yeah, make it about the child. And also make it about the child. And then you can make it about you, because let me tell you why. So here's where you could make it about you. Because at first I was like really upset and really angry. And even though we were co-parent and she would go with him every other weekend and all of that stuff, at first it was very upsetting to me. And I didn't even know what to do with myself during those times, right? Because I hadn't been accustomed to having that time to myself. And then when he would break the time, when he'd say, oh, I can't make it, or I'd be pissed, right? And at first I'd be pissed because I was like, oh, you're breaking your word with your daughter, because that was important. But really it's because I began to see how I got to utilize my time. Like, we as moms need to and deserve and get to have a break. We get to have our me time. And so like, you know, if you can co-parent and co-parent well, the child definitely is the first and foremost and at the forefront. And they definitely benefit from having a healthy relationship with both parents. And then you as a parent get to have your time for yourself. And that is like priceless.
Yeah.
So I say, make it about the child and find a way to co-parent the best that you can.
Yeah. So what does your soul care me time look like now? Or what did it look like then and what has it evolved to? How about that?
It looked like a lot of doing. So I used to volunteer a lot, right? I used to volunteer a lot. And not that that's not, people are like, well, what's wrong with that? It's not a bad thing at all. However, what I found was that I was volunteering a lot. I was busy. I was doing. And I was so, my mother would say, you always doing something, girl. Like you never home. You were like super busy. And I'd be like, because I got this to do and I want to show up for this person and be here for that and do all of that. And it all looked great. But what I realized when I took a pause was that what I was doing is that I was too scared to sit still. I was too afraid to be with me because I didn't even know what that would look like if I press pause.
Help us.
So I am like busy, because I'm like, what will happen if I sit still? Like, what does that look like? But I didn't know because I was so busy moving, right? And then, and scared that like, if I either sat still too long, that things wouldn't get done, or if I sat still too long, that I would look like I'm not accomplishing anything, or if I sat, or what I realized also in sitting still, it didn't allow me for true connections because it's hard to make those when you're like moving. So when I finally did, I was like, there was a 1 year, because I'd been doing a lot of busy. 1 year, I was like, I'm not volunteering anymore, right? I'm not going to be doing anything else. Only thing I'm going to do is go to work, come home, be with my children, like be in that moment. And not to say that when I was doing those things that I wasn't present with my children, because I'm always present with them. But in terms of like me part, I was just going. And so I was like, I'm just cutting everything off other than the things that need to be done. And so that I could really see what that was. And so when I did that, I got to be clear that I do love volunteering. I do love being with people. That is actually the fuel that feeds my soul. Like without connecting with women and empowering women, being with them, I don't know where I would be or what I would do. So I know that, but the question becomes how much of it that I get to do? How do I create balance around that where I'm not running myself ragged? So sitting still became very important for me. And that meant through meditation and through chanting. My soul care looked like baths, right? I was only a shower girl. Like I take my shower because that's quick, right? So for a city girl like me and a woman who's moving in, like I could shower, I'm in and out. Bath, you gotta do what? Sit still. So I wasn't sitting still.
Oh my God.
So I began to take baths because then that allowed me to be still and in that moment. So the meditation, the chanting, the taking bath, to even start taking myself on dates. Like I went on dates and I went on dates by myself, like sat at restaurants by myself and did that so that I could build a relationship with people. I needed to know who I was. And so that's what my practice looks like. And then sometimes it looks like exercising and sometimes it don't. Sometimes it does. So, you know, it's different things depending on the season or depending on the feeling, but I'm very clear that it always gets to be something. There always has to be something that gets carved out for me. And when I'm not doing that, I'm off and I could feel it. I'm off emotionally, I'm off mentally. And then I take a pause and I go, what's going on? And it's like, oh, you haven't done any self-care. And that means you haven't connected with people. You haven't done an exercise, perhaps you haven't done a prayer or meditation. And so I have to add bare minimum, put those things in practice to be able to feel well about myself and what's going to be next in my life.
That's so good. So good. Because if you do stop, you have to think or feel.
And that's exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Ugh. Hope y'all are catching all these jewels. Let's do some rapid soul questions real quick. The first thing that comes to your mind, just spit it out.
Okay.
What's the last song you listened to?
Oh, Naked by LMA.
Ugh, Live. Love that album.
Right? I literally just did that and was like, if you could love me, I can't do the words, but if you could love me naked, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the last song I just listened to.
Yes. What
Mhm.
trait do you like the most about yourself?
My ability to see people,
Mm,
to see them and to hear what is being said, but most importantly, what is not being said.
mm, that's good. That's good. What product must you use every day besides your cell phone? It could be any product.
I guess my shower gel.
Okay. Important. That's important.
That's important.
Is there a particular brand you like, or?
I use Dove.
Me too.
Yeah, I use Dove shower gel.
If you go to dinner, if you could go to dinner with anybody, who could it be? Who would it be? Alive or passed away?
At this current moment, based upon what I'm going through, if I could go to dinner with anyone, it would be my mother.
I love that. Me too. What's one book you believe everyone should read?
Uh, Conversations with God,
Mm,
Malcolm Gladwell.
going on the list, KiKi, going on the list. What are you looking to do next, and how can the Soulkation Tribe support you?
I am looking to continue. So I've been on hiatus from my podcast, Just Bloom. And so I am looking to get off of hiatus. And so the Soulkation Pod, you guys could support me with tuning in to past episodes and then obviously to future episodes to come. Yes.
Yes. Thank you so much, KiKi. That was amazing. Make sure
You're
you
welcome.
share this episode with your friends. Share it on YouTube. You can listen to it on Spotify, iHeartRadio. We would love to get your feedback. Also, send KiKi some love. We're going to share her Instagram and her website. So send her some love also. And we'll catch you on the next episode of the Soulkation Podcast.